In one of those stories you didn't think was actually related to comic books, Christian Cooper, a former Marvel editor, writer, was watching birds when somebody decided to walk their dog without a leash, and an argument ensued, and racism occurred, and somebody got fired. Do those words all make sense? That does not seem like one sentence that should go together. But let me try and explain kind of what happened and why this is a thing. Hey everybody, this is Perch. This is a weird story because it's a pointless story. Christian Cooper, who was a former editor writer at Marvel Comics, I'm trying to think. He did this goes back a ways. He did a bit of Excalibur, some work on the Darkhold series. Not the biggest comic books Marvel done. Kind of a I don't want to say a bit player, but a smaller player in terms of the comics community, but also somebody who had a pretty good reputation. I think if you talk to anybody inside the company, you don't hear. It's funny. You either hear, "Oh man, this person was an amazing person, did a lot for comics," or "This person was a garbage human who had lots of arguments or big controversy," or like, "Oh, he's a nice guy," or she's a nice woman, and they did stuff. That's Christian Cooper. Kind of fit in that just nice person. No real complaints. Just I don't want to say just kind of there because they contributed, but it's not like this is not a major player in comics, but certainly somebody who was well liked in comics. Does that make any sense? Somebody that it just didn't. No, nobody had any issues with this person. You might say, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, here we go. So Chris Cooper is a bird watcher, part of the Audubon Society. And it's funny, I didn't think that bird watching was as much of a thing anymore, but apparently in New York, during pandemics, you can be out watching birds. So he is watching birds in Central Park. And as he is watching birds, a woman comes along who's got her dog off leash. And this is a place where dogs are supposed to be on leash. And he decides to kind of step in and say, hey, you need to put your dog on a leash. Now, at this point in the story, if the story kind of ended here, most people would probably be on the woman's side, would probably say, this guy is like, can he just mind his own business? It's a pandemic. I mean, yeah, dogs shouldn't be running around everywhere crazy, but, come on, in all things considered, can people just leave, let people do their thing? I mean, the way the story starts, you might go, okay, he's pestering somebody else. He's Karening somebody else. But no, not to be out Karened. The woman who's talking to had the dog gets angry and refuses to take the dog. Well, not refuse, just refuses to control the dog. And probably her initial reaction was not, I don't want to say a reasonable one, but a hey, mind your own business one. But that I suspect most people would have had. But then she decides to take it to the next level and get fairly belligerent with the guy, who kind of decides to start filming her. Now, why is he filming her? Well, because unfortunately, there's too many instances where people get into minor scuffles at the park or other places, and then suddenly, trouble ensues. So he decides to start filming her. Who knows what he's planning to do with the video? We know at least, later that it didn't seem like he was trying to gotcha anyone. Some people have claimed in this story that he was out to cause trouble and he deliberately was kind of goading her into a fight. But if you look at the comments and everything else, you look at the video that was filmed, she is clearly the crazy one. You can't really brush that aside. She comes off nuts. So she gets progressively more agitated and says, "You're threatening me." And he made a comment like, "You're not going to like what's going to happen." But in the grand world of threats, this is not a threat. You have to really squint your eyes and use some imagination to believe that is a big threat. But nonetheless, she decides to kind of go off on him and call the police and get really pissy. And she eventually decides to leash up the dog. He stops filming at that point, and unfortunately, that in her calls, and this is where our country and everything else is just too racially charged. This is where it's a shame that it's gotten to this point, because in her call, she says an African American is threatening her and to the police. And you could stop at this point and say a few different things. So obviously, I'm of the position. I know a lot of people feel immediately that this was the woman was being racist, and she very well might have been. Unfortunately, I don't know inside of her heart, and I don't want to speculate on it. But what we can determine very clearly, because we have the evidence in front of us, is that she's being an ass. If somebody tells you, "Hey, leash up the dog," in a place there, the dog is supposed to be leashed, right? There's rules. It's kind of like if you walk into the grocery store and you have no pants on, and outside the grocery store is a little sign that says you need to wear pants. You can't really get too pissy and huffy about being told you have to go wear pants. The rules are clearly stated. You're supposed to wear pants in the grocery store. This woman's walking her dog. You're not supposed to walk the dog without a leash. She's got the dog off of a leash, and she's told to stop. And you could, again, you could argue that the guy should have just kind of let things go and just not worried so much about it. But rules are rules. And it wasn't like he was inventing some new rule or being kind of overly weird about it. He was kind of telling her what existed. And, sure enough, she decides to respond by calling the police that an African American guy is threatening her. That's a weird reaction. Now, some have pointed out from the transcript that he said, like I said earlier, he said, if you keep, doing this, you're not going to like what happens. But again, you look at Cooper, and they're both named Cooper actually, which makes it weird. But you look at him, and you look at the situation, the other things that were said, and it's like it's not like you'd have to really be kind of squinting your eyes to feel like your life was in danger or something big was going on. He even said you're not going to like what happens. If anything, I think that's a weird way to say it. He said that in a weird way. But it's not. I mean, again, you're the one who's breaking the rules. You're the one who is walking around. You have your dog off the leash. You're the one who's doing all this. I think you have a lot of. You could certainly be morally outraged to say, why is this person sticking their nose in our business? Why is this guy being a Karen, to use that term? Why is he doing this? But the second she decides to call the police and tell on the black guy, that's where it gets weird. Like that's not a normal reaction, and this is where I'm trying to lay it out this way very carefully, so you can kind of picture yourself in this role. So imagine there's you, and you go to the park, and your dog really wants to be off the leash, and you know that because there's signs up that says keep your dog on a leash. You know that you're not supposed to do this, but screw it. Your dog is hyper, and you want to give the dog some exercise, so you take the dog off the leash. And somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, or you nobody even comes up. You kind of come to somebody else, and that person says, "Hey, you need to put that dog on a leash." The guy is enforcing the existing rules. Your normal reaction as a human being would not be to call the police on the black guy or the white guy or the Mexican guy or the Asian guy or the Filipino woman or whatever it happens to be. Your reaction is not going to be to immediately call the cops on somebody who's telling you that you're breaking the clearly posted rules. That's a weird reaction. Most people would be angry. They might curse. They might, screw you. Then they'd walk away. They don't want to cause trouble because they know they're in the wrong. They're breaking the rules. So it is a very strange reaction that she decided to, boldly call the cops on this guy who's telling her to follow the rules. That's just a weird reaction, and it would be weird for any of us. So she does this. Obviously, it backfires tremendously in her face. She winds up getting social media outrage. I hate that. You read some of the responses and be like, that woman should be killed. That woman should lose her pets forever and never be allowed to work and live in poverty and be homeless. Like, hey, chill out, assholes. Somebody being a jerk and doing something wrong on social media does not need a legion of jerks all kind of wanting to send this person to prison. That's again a weird reaction to somebody being a jerk. Generally, when somebody's a jerk, you're like, well, I'm glad that person got their comeuppance and everything else, but I'm not going to wish that person dead. I like how on social media, by the way, people get really anxious and really pissy about death threats, and you should. Death threats are serious, but then have zero qualms about making death threats against somebody else they don't like. Who it's all very stupid. So anyway, um, but it went terrible. It went viral on social media. It resulted in her having to surrender her dog to a shelter, which is that seems fairly horrifying to me. I mean, I don't know. Somebody, again, I look at the origin of all this stuff, and the woman's out trying to walk her dog. The dog's just trying to have a companion and maybe be walked and go poop outside somewhere. And then suddenly the dog is having to be surrendered to a shelter. That doesn't seem fair for anybody. I mean, I don't know. The woman's does something really stupid and calling the police and calling out the black guy. Again, seems racist, but I calling somebody, labeling these things without knowing anything more than the context we've been given also seems a little irresponsible to me. So I can settle with the woman seems like an ass, and I can just kind of leave it there. But surrendered the dog, and then was put on administrative leave and ultimately fired by her company. She did come out and apologize to the man and family. It was unacceptable. She humbly, fully apologized to everybody who's seen the video. Everybody's been offended. I understand why you think of me in lower light. So it's a lousy. The whole situation is lousy. And again, is this a comic story? Well, I mean, um, no. I mean, it is Christian Cooper who worked in comics. So this is somebody, and a lot of other comic people commented on this by, again, this woman is a Karen. This stuff is awful. How dare? I mean, a lot of outrage on the parts of people within the comic community. Which, okay, you guys, you be mad. That's fine. But at the same time, I always look at situations like this, and I try and think, how could I get myself into this situation on either front? Could I see myself being in a place where I'm just trying to mind my own business and I'm trying to maybe watch birds because that's the thing I love to do, and somebody shows up with a dog and the dog is kind of running around off leash, and I tell somebody, hey, you're not supposed to have your dog off leash, and this results in kind of just screaming kind of craziness and somebody calling the cops on me. I mean, that would be terrible. I can picture that happening. I've had situations like that before where I'm just, kind of trying to mind my own business and basically follow the rules, and somebody's a jerk. On the other end, we don't know what's going on in this woman's life, and I don't think it's nobody should say, hey, if you're having a hard day, that excuses you from being an asshole. It does not. You should have some basic decency, and this is where I get to what are the trigger points in your life where you would do certain things. And to me, the weird part about all this is the reaction of, hey, somebody is telling me to obey the rules. I'm going to call the police on them and say an African American man is threatening me. That's a weird outcome. I can't picture myself doing any of those things. I can definitely picture myself feeling like I was just trying to give the dog some time, and I may be pissed. I'm like, that guy's sticking his nose in my business, asshole. I can definitely picture myself doing that. I can't picture myself calling the police. I can't picture myself calling the police to get the black guy in trouble. I mean, even if the police are like, can you describe this guy who's telling you to obey the rules? And you're like, well, he's black. I don't know. I mean, if I just can't picture it. And so this is the question I guess I have for you in this video is, can you picture yourself doing this? Can you picture yourself being in this situation where on either side, you're the person watching the birds, you're the person watching the dogs, or not walking the dog, singular dog. I can picture myself as a person with the birds. My personality, I probably would just be like dummy walking their dog without a leash. They're supposed to have the leash on, but my personality, I probably would not go up to them and say, excuse me, did you pay attention to the rules? That's probably not me. On the other end, though, I have no basis of connection with that woman. I just can't. The wanting to call the police on something, it just is a weird reaction. Now, granted, maybe there's a third camera out there we haven't seen yet, where Christian Cooper pulled out a big giant Harlequin mallet from his back pocket and was threatening to hit her with it. In which case, you should say, that you're being threatened by the black guy with a giant mallet. That would probably be a good thing to do. But nothing we've seen in any of the videos indicates any of this. And the woman just seems crazy. So I don't know. You never know what's going on in these people's lives. You don't know if she is pissed, or if she's like had a really horrible beginning of the day and it was just things got out of control. Life has a way of doing that. You think you're on top of things, and then one thing leads to another, and suddenly everything's out of control. And you can find yourself slipping into those moments very, very easily. So I'm sympathetic to people who get there and then want to get themselves out. I want to give them a helping hand out of those situations where things maybe went out of control and they shouldn't have. But at the same time, weird story. It was definitely the internet story of the day. Weird that it has this crossover with comics. Weird that it now shows up in my channel, but this is the world we live in. You know, maybe next time when you break the rules, you just shut the F up and you just, put the leash on your dog. I don't know. I mean, I get it. Everybody gets heated when you're told what to do, but all the same, like, weird choices were made. Very, very strange choices. I want to try and understand like what drove somebody to do this, but it's hard because it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyway, that's my thought. What about you? Did you care about this story? Did you pay attention to any of this? Do you think this stuff's all crazy? Let me know your thoughts below in the comments. If you think it's crazy that I covered this at all, you're welcome to that too. Probably a good call on your part. Otherwise, like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, Facebook too, and most importantly, thanks for listening.